Hi, and welcome to our next talk with Sparrow Read of DADA.art, as well as many other places. And before I bounce it off to Sparrow, I'm going to read the definition of what she has sent us as her bio, which I think says more about her practice than I think lots of things could. So Sparrow is a software engineer and technologist, a traditional artist working in encaustic wax medium, and a digital artist working with AI, generative adversarial networks. And she is also the founder of Women of Crypto Art, which is indeed acronymed into WOCA. So I'm going to bounce it off to her so that we can learn more about the invisible economy and the radical separation of art and the market, which I think is a very interesting take on lots of the other things that we've been talking about over the past few days. So over to you, Sparrow.
Excellent. Thank you, Natalia. Very, very, very happy to be here. Thanks to both you and Brian and all the organizers of the Vancouver Biennale for inviting DADA and allowing us to share what we've been talking about and working on this year. I do have to thank Bea and Judy for giving me the opportunity to present the invisible economy here tonight. DADA's their baby. And I'm honored in their belief and trust in me to do justice to this incredible idea that is the invisible economy. Also really need to say thank you to the entire DADA community, everyone that's participated in the invisible economy working groups. We wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be where we are without all of you. And really, if there's any group of people that's capable of accomplishing all of the stuff I'm going to talk about this evening, it is this group of people. So thank you all. I'll start at the beginning of this year. I gave a talk at VRAF, the Virtual Rare Art Fair, where I shared my experiences and hopes and dreams about radical community and radical collaboration in crypto art. That was in March or April, early in the year. And at that time, I never in my wildest dreams could have imagined a project like the invisible economy that would take all those hopes and dreams and not just meet them, but also exceed them in lots of ways. So DADA, as I hope you all know, is a platform. It's a collaborative drawing platform where artists can visually respond to other artists' drawings and create these conversations of one artist responding to another artist. It was unlike anything of its kind when it was born, and it's been reimagining itself ever since. And with the invisible economy, DADA is reimagining everything about community and collaboration and rare art on the blockchain and reimagining it from the ground up. So to me, that's pretty much as radical as you can get. So I'll start off with a bit of why. Why are we doing all of this? So the next slide. Well, we can all recognize some of the problems that exist in the traditional art markets and probably also in society in general. And indeed, when people are asked why they've come to the blockchain space, they frequently say it's because the old system isn't working for them. They want to get away from that old broken way of doing things that isn't serving them. And they want to create something new, something hopefully more fair and equitable. But I think what we feel we're currently seeing is this new world of crypto art is going down some of the same paths as the old world that we were trying to improve on. So we asked why, or well, more precisely, Bea asked why. And that question is what led to the invisible economy. That question led her and Judy to spend a year researching these topics and writing the Invisible Economy white paper, which is a series which you can find as a series of 13 Medium posts. And I'll make sure that I post a link to it after the session's over. So what they found in that research was really that by recreating the same systems that exist in that old model, this old model, things like marketplaces and just the overall competition over scarce resources, that model inevitably leads to certain results. So by recreating those systems, what we'll get is the same results as what we've got in the old system that we're trying to leave behind. So we aren't really doing anything new. We really just have new technology that accelerates us to the same results that it took hundreds of years for the old art market to get to. So one of the key insights from the invisible economy is simply the logic that says, if you want different results, you need to do things differently. So you need to change the system and focus on different incentives and mechanisms so that you can get different results. And all the problems that we're trying to leave behind, we can avoid in the invisible economy because we're building from the ground up. We're not just tweaking or shoehorning or building on top of what already exists. We're actually designing something completely new, completely fresh from the ground up. So I'll explain a bit about the invisible economy, and then we can talk about some of the things that we've already done so far to begin to build this system. The next slide. The invisible economy, as Natalie said, is the radical separation of art and the market. So artists get to create the art that they want, however much they want, whenever they want, independent of concerns for the market. That's the goal. Why do we call it the invisible economy? So let's start with economy. Economies are based on incentives. And most economies we're familiar with are based on extrinsic incentives like wages and bonuses and promotions and deadlines. In contrast to that, the invisible economy is structured all around intrinsic incentives. So intrinsic incentives are our internal desires to take certain actions are innate curiosity or wanting to learn a new skill. And this means that we engage in doing things because doing the activity itself is its own reward. And this is already in operation currently. It already works like this on the DADA platform as it exists now. There are hundreds of artists that go and draw and comment and collaborate, and dozens of artists that even organize events like the live drawing that some of you may have seen here at the Biennale yesterday. All of these things are done from intrinsic motivations, people wanting to do them because they're fun, because they get satisfaction from them, all for intrinsic reasons. So that's the economy side. And I'll come back to this because it's probably one of the biggest challenges in designing the invisible economy. But let's talk about the invisible part. How is it invisible? It's invisible because of blockchain. Blockchain's what makes it possible for the economy to be both invisible and transparent. It's invisible because we can separate out the value creation. So whether that be the drawing and art making, or the developers writing code, or people collecting art, or general organizing, and other kinds of value contribution. We can separate that from direct market transactions. It's all transparent because all of the actual transactions are written to the blockchain, and anyone can track them there. Why is it invisible is probably the more important question. And that's really because we have decades of research that's shown us over and over again that when intrinsic incentives like wanting to draw or collaborating are replaced by extrinsic rewards like payments or salaries, the intrinsic incentives diminish and in some cases can even disappear completely. So an expected material, tangible reward like money hurts creativity and innovation because creativity and innovation rely on intrinsic motivations. Standard market dynamics and competition make people less willing to experiment, more afraid of failure, less altruistic. And all of these things are the key reasons why we are separating art from the market and why we're making an invisible economy. The next slide. And there's a question. All right, I'll answer questions at the very end. But thank you. If anybody does have questions as I go along, please put them in the chat so that I can answer them. And then the next slide. Okay, so the invisible economy sets out a framework of incentives, and the incentives are based on needs and motivations. So I think that's the next slide. There. So on here you can see we have a needs axis where you have individual drives, like the need for validation, the need for autonomy, the need for self-expression. And that goes on a continuum to the communal needs of collaboration and interdependence and the need for safety. And then on the y-axis, you have the motivations. So at the top, you have intrinsic motivators, such as the desire for self-expression, pursuit of greater good, contributing to something greater than yourself, and creative collaboration. And then at the base are extrinsic or material needs, such as a baseline financial need. Also needs for validation and long-term wealth creation. So stores for the future, an assured future. And this basically is the framework around which the invisible economy is built. So if you remember, I was just talking about the importance of intrinsic motivations and how extrinsic rewards cause a weakening or sometimes completely eliminate intrinsic motivations. One of the other insights of the invisible economy is that by focusing on these intrinsic motivations, we can ensure that the actions that you take on the DADA platform, whether it be drawing or collecting or educating or just connecting in the comments together or collaborating together, all of these actions in and of themselves satisfy the intrinsic needs of the people doing them just by doing them. So the action itself becomes the reward. One of the other insights that arises from that and arises from the community because it has been in existence for years now, is that it's built on social norms rather than market norms. So if we go to the next slide. The difference between social norms and market norms are, social norms are basically, are you willing to help a friend move house? Are you willing to cook dinner for your family, right? Those are things that are dictated by social norms. Market norms come into effect when you think about what you're willing to do for X amount of money. So the insight here is that if your community is based around a market first, then market norms will be the basis your community operates around. So if your community, like DADA, is based around social norms, because DADA doesn't have a marketplace, then it's more likely to be based on intrinsic motivations. And DADA as a community has operated around social norms for years. And this is really what allows the invisible economy to be something that will work within the context of DADA and hopefully beyond. But it is quite literally something money can't buy. So how did we build this new thing? and this new economy. And the best metaphor is what's on this slide, is a deconstruct then reconstruct process. We had to deconstruct and really pick apart everything we thought we knew. So Bea and Lenara and I did the first ever Token Engineering Academy. Course, it was called Ecosystem Value Flows. And that's where we met Shebnam. And that's really where we got to grips with the steps we needed to take and the questions we still needed to answer to make the invisible economy a reality. Once that course was over, we set up 3 working groups to look at different aspects and get answers to some of the questions that would then feed into the next phase. So the next slide. The first working group was looking at the governance model. And these are the principles that was the output from that model. And that's self-engagement. So people contribute to what they want, when they want, and as much as they want. The system will be equitable. Power flows to whomever has the initiative and willingness to do stuff and contribute value. They have decision-making power in proportion to people's value contribution and how much they have impacted the decision. It's continuous. It's an open, ongoing deliberation process that ensures that a diversity of options are on the table. And it's participatory. Participatory decision-making means not everyone should make decisions, but anyone who wants to can. Next slide is the second working group, and that focused on contribution mapping, value flows. So DADA has one of the largest collections of rare digital art in the world. They've got 125,000 individual artworks stored on IPFS, and this incredibly huge store of value. And one of the outcomes of this working group was to actually map the value flows of how that gets created. And what it also allowed us to do was to understand how we can protect that value flow, because that's already in existence. It's already operating today in this manner. It's already generating that value. That value is already there. And what we wanted to ensure is that when we add other flows into the system, like tokens and money, that doesn't negatively impact how this flow operates. So it is, our first consideration is a protection of this preciousness that is already existing within DADA. And then the next slide will be the value, the contribution metrics. Contribution metrics were really a way of mapping all of the different ways that value can be created and defining how we can represent particularly those intangible, unquantifiable values. We all know how to measure sales, so that's easy. The harder bit was, how do you take things like joy and measure those? And we were really gifted with having someone point out the work of Georgia Lupi, who's a well-known data analyst. And we took inspiration from her data visualizations to be able to visualize this intangible value as a way of representing that within our system. And so this is an example, a real example of a live drawing event that happened in Rome recently, and all of the participants and the value that they got from that event simply by participating in that event. And the next slide. So all of these three working groups produced output, which goes into the second phase of our building of this system. And that is now divided into two parts. One is the system modeling and testing, and the other is art as currency. So we've already started with the system modeling, and we'll be able to simulate and test how adding in DADA tokens and an external marketplace and other revenue sources affects that key value flow of the core of DADA. I spent this week setting up all of my Python environment, and I'll start this weekend working with CAD models to begin testing the system and determining all of the parameters that are required to create a sustainable invisible economy. And that's where the ecosystem value flows in the token engineering courses have really come in. They arrived at the perfect time when we needed them to do the work that needed to be done in the invisible economy. And all of this filters back into drawings on DADA as shown here. So the next slide. And this is our Miro board where we collect all of the important bits of information. And I just wanted to read this because it does sum it up really nicely, where we are and what we think will happen. And it's an accurate reflection of how we've felt throughout the working groups. So they say, I think we're about to discover that it's the planets seem to behave paradoxically. So when we first started, it just didn't make sense. And people were saying, oh, that will never work. But really, it's only because we grew up in a pretty wrong model, right? So we thought that all of the planets and the sun revolved around the Earth. So what we're doing and what we're prepping, and when we get through this, it'll be revealed that everything does make sense because how we were looking at things was wrong. How the planets aren't orbiting around the Earth, we are all orbiting around the sun. And when we apply the right model, we see that all the value flows and the paradox vanishes. So my hope is that it isn't a one-off and only reserved for artists' experience, but it can be one for all human co-creation. So I think I've got a minute left and I can take the question. So let's answer the question. Says, I've been thinking about how the invisible economy is related to communities that are dealing with issues of poverty and isolation. I'm wondering about the exacerbation of further dislocation and inaccessibility, while acknowledging that specialized areas of practice often rely on targeted communities of people gathered around an action and topic. So yeah, this is something that we have thought about a bit, and it's something that I think we will go much deeper into as we really clarify levels within the invisible economy. Currently, we're thinking this is going to generate a basic income for artists. The intention is to generate a basic income for artists. And obviously, a basic income in somewhere like Venezuela will go farther than that same amount of basic income will go in New York City, for example, or here in the UK. And so the intention is not to adjust it for cost of living, because we recognize that someone living in New York City has access to more resources just because of where they live normally. And that's a generalization. We know that there can be deprived areas in Western worlds as well. But to make a real difference, a real meaningful difference to people, I think we did want to make sure that it was not means tested. And so it will be countries in South America, in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, that it requires an internet connection. It doesn't require any training. It doesn't require any skills to begin with. You log on and you start drawing. And as you draw and as you respond to conversations, you create value within the system, and the system will reward you for the value that you create. I think that the COVID-19 and the lockdowns and the lack of movement that has led to is probably another thing that will mean online platforms like DADA and cryptocurrencies in general will be seen as more attainable. They'll make more sense to people, hopefully. I hope that's answered your question. Yeah, so I think the only thing that I wanted to do was end with two quotes from the white paper, because there really wasn't a better way to sum up what the invisible economy was. So I'm going to read these from the white paper. So, for the first time in history, we can think about art accruing value beyond its commodification, financialization, and institutionalization. We can think about artists not having to depend on donations and grants or holding multiple jobs, leaving no time for them to be the artists they are. At DADA, we believe that anyone can make art, and if everyone actually did, our society would be more empathetic and cohesive. DADA is different from other platforms in that we focus on the creative process, but the real power of DADA is that we do this together. And that is what makes DADA magic. So, thank you all for listening to me ramble on about the invisible economy and all of this stuff that I find fabulous and just really, really amazing. If anybody has any more questions, please feel free to just send me a message anywhere here on this platform or Twitter. My Twitter ID is blackbox.art. Also Telegram, I'm blackbox.art. please reach out. Happy to talk about the invisible economy in any time, really. Thank you.